Hi Archers! I'm finally done with the new ability tier list. I've been putting together numbers, research, and testing out all the weapons in the past few months. And finally, I am finished. In this video, I'll be showing you an ability tier list for all weapons so you can make the best out of your runs on the weapon you are currently using. My name is Teeds and I make many videos from guides, tier list gameplays, and more. Please do subscribe and click the bell for more Archero content. A disclaimer, not everyone is going to agree with the tier list. This is based on my experience, research, and numbers. You may or may not agree with me, and that's okay. Always stick to what works best for you. This is mostly for players who want to have an idea on how they can build, and not as experienced or see if they have anything they can improve on. But if you've been stuck on a chapter for a while, the culprit could be the abilities you are choosing. If that's the case, maybe try something new after this tier list. There is no set ability tier list. A lot of the abilities you choose could be based on your playstyle. The tier list I'm going to give you is just a general tier list. This can change depending on what hero you're using and what chapter you're on. For example, some chapters do really bad with freeze, some do better with ricochet. And another example based on playstyle, some players love freeze, some players hate to use freeze. The tier list for the weapons will have slight changes. So first, I'll show you a general tier list that outlines everything to do with defense, situational, etc. In the first row, always pick up these abilities no matter what. I suggest only picking up multi-shot and front arrow once each, but remember that's just generally. Second row, extremely strong. Some of you may be new to the dwarf ability, but basically that ability shrinks you and makes it much easier to avoid projectiles. I'd suggest picking up slow projectile over invincibility and wingman, but between wingman and invincibility, it's up to you. These abilities may not be relevant if you're just extremely good at dodging. In strong, with attack and crit boost, it's up to you once again. One is increasing your raw attack damage, the other is increasing the chance and crit damage. I know some of you do not like chance, so you can ignore them if you'd like, but dodge and agility are strong, even for those who are not running a dodge build. I'd just like to quickly note that these are not necessarily in order. It really depends if you're after defense or damage. So putting dodge behind attack and crit does not make it better. It just depends on what you're after. In above average, Bloodthirst actually surprised me a lot. When I first started Archero, I didn't really value it, but as I got more experience, this ability helped me push through so many chapters where I was struggling with mobs. Diagonal arrows is also strong even by itself. I like headshot a lot, but again, if you don't like the chance items, then just avoid them. I found that the proc really helps in later chapters where monsters have a lot of health, so that small chance of just taking out a mob that you're having problems with or struggling with is valuable in my opinion. Walk through walls and walk through water may be surprising for you. These abilities now grants plus 15% damage along with the ability to walk on things, which makes it so much better than before. However, you can only get this ability from the devil, so it's up to you if you want to lose health for it for that particular run. In average, I have Bouncy Wall. The ability by itself is not anything spectacular, but with diagonal arrows, side arrows, and rear arrow, this ability can be extremely strong. However, by itself, generally is not anything special. The sword strike abilities are generally average, really great against bosses, and especially if you have to focus on dodging projectiles. So where these abilities shined the most was in chapter 7. I think they lose their hypeness a little bit once you beat that chapter because they don't always hit the mobs, but they are really, really good against bosses. You can see that all of the freeze abilities are an average. This is also up to your personal playstyle, as I know some players do not like using freezing abilities at all, which is fine, but because of the extra crowd control effect, it's generally better than the other abilities in the same family. Blaze Arrow and Fire Circle are also higher in tier because they provide a good boost in damage per second. In below average, I put the sword abilities pretty low because you generally do not want to be close to the enemies, so most of the time they're not even proccing, which means that they just take up a lot of space. However, these are higher in tier if you are struggling with melee mobs. So if you are struggling with melee monsters in your chapter, these abilities can really help if you're not able to kill them quickly enough. The problem with melee mobs that are really powerful or overpower your damage, they can start ganging up on you where you start taking a lot of collision damage. So these can help in regards to collision damage, but if you're just not struggling with them at all, then you don't really need these abilities. In situational, it just really depends. I put all the spirit abilities here as sometimes they just make me pick it because there is nothing else I can choose that I want, but I don't focus on my pet abilities at all. But do note that apparently the pet abilities have added perks now, I'm just not sure what they are. And these are the abilities that you want to avoid. Giant is the opposite of dwarf, but giant does increase your damage. Even though it does increase your damage, I don't find the increase worth it as the ability makes it very hard to avoid attacks and your chance of dying is just much higher. But again, if you do not have any trouble avoiding any projectile, then giant would be really good for you, but I don't think that's the case for most players. And in never pick up, meteor and stars. Majority of the time, meteor does nothing, it just misses, and both families are very, very distracting, especially stars. Even though it's slightly better than meteor, it makes it very hard to see monster attacks on the screen. That is just the brief summary of the general tier list. Remember, it can change depending on your chapter, on your playstyle, on your hero, but generally this should fit for most players. Moving on to the weapons. Please note that the epic effects are considered in these tier lists. I left timestamps in the comments down below so you can skip to the weapon you are using. The Death Scythe. Epic passive, chance to headshot enemies with less than 30% health. What I've changed here is I've moved down Bouncy Wall to avoid, I've moved down side arrows to below average, and I moved headshot up to strong. So the reasoning for this is because the Death Scythe has a strong knockback. Bouncy Wall with the multiple arrow family often moves the monsters. Moving the monsters or changing their positioning dramatically is extremely problematic. It can move the monsters closer to you, it can even change their attack route. So, for example, an attack that wasn't going to hit you before can now hit you because the positioning has been changed. This has happened to me quite a lot. I now avoid Bouncy Wall on the Death Scythe. It's not the worst ability and it can be really fun to use. And I would still use it if you're just farming chapters because you don't need to progress in them or anything like that and most of the time you're surviving. But for chapters you want to progress on, I would avoid picking up Bouncy Wall. With Headshot, the epic passive makes this ability even stronger. Next, the Tornado. Epic passive, increase bonus damage on return. Move down Bouncy Wall to avoid. Move down Ricochet to avoid. There are a lot of players who love using Tornado with these abilities, and I do too. I think it's very fun, I just don't use it for chapters I'm progressing on. If you like it, you enjoy it, and it works for you, then that's what matters. However, these abilities do take away the return damage of the Tornado, which is the reason the Tornado is the highest in damage per second. These abilities are fine for low chapter farming or easy chapter farming, but if you're trying to progress, the damage reduction from these abilities on the Tornado, plus losing the damage bonus increase on the return, can make it very hard to progress. Piercing is moved down to never pick up. Tornado already has a built-in pierce effect. I've moved up diagonal arrows to strong. Even without Bouncy Wall, the Tornado performs really well with this ability, especially because they are all proccing the bonus/return damage. In turn, I've also moved up rear arrow and side arrows to above average. Next, the Brave Bow. Epic passive, increased crit damage. With this weapon, I only moved up crit boost to extremely strong. Next, the Saw Blade. Epic passive, increase attack speed for 3 seconds upon entering the room, and also the Bright Spear. Epic passive, increase damage when attacking the same target type. With these weapons, they are both extremely fast and generally not too different. I've moved up Ricochet to always pick up, and Blaze and Lightning Arrow to average. These items proc a lot better on the Saw Blade and the Spear. Because the travel time is just so quick on these weapons, you have more damage output on these abilities. With Bouncy Wall, I moved it up to above average, and with any of the multiple arrow families, it makes it even stronger. This is how I use the Saw Blade and Bright Spear, but honestly, these two weapons are pretty flexible. Some players like to put even more attack speed on these items, but personally, I think they're already pretty fast, so I tend to prioritize raw damage or crit over attack speed. And the last weapon is the Stalker Staff. Epic effect, increase crit chance to lower the target's HP. By itself, this weapon is not super crazy in terms of damage per second. However, with Bouncy Wall and diagonal arrows, and if you could get side and rear, this makes the weapon extremely powerful. Together in combination, I have moved them up to always pick up. I even recommend picking up the multiple arrow families more than once if you're lucky. I've moved front arrow down to extremely strong. This is up to the player. Front arrow decreases the damage of your other arrows. Some have said front arrow really helps them, so I guess it's up to you. I've increased crit over attack, however again, it's up to you. And that is all for today's tier list. Remember, as I said, based on my experience, research numbers, and opinion, and from some other players who have also helped me put this together. Mostly for players who want some guidance. If you already know what you enjoy, love, or what works for you, then keep going. You do not have to follow my tier list. I thank you very much for watching. Any likes and comments would be super rad. Feel free to subscribe and click the bell for more Archero videos. I hope to see you again for the next one. Bye!